Ray. What do you want to do tonight?
The same thing we do every night, Pinky. Try to take over the world.
All right, yo, let's get into it.
Try to take over the world.
Speech and freedom.
Try to take over the world.
And greatest chaplain in the world, Mr.
Try
Lance
to
O'Neill.
take over the world.
What's up, world? We are back on this birthday Sunday. Happy third birthday to the POGs. As you can see, we got some new background swag. Chappie, how are you?
I'm doing well.
I am here. And if you guys haven't noticed, we have the esteemed Mr. Gregg Easterbrook here with us once again to celebrate our third birthday. How are you, Mr. Easterbrook?
I'm doing fine, KJ.
It has been a while. We are going to jump right into it today, ladies and gentlemen, because we were having an amazing conversation off stage. So we were talking about the 2020 election between Trump and Biden, and we had a wrinkle that we wanted to present. And the wrinkle was Biden was on the ropes in the primaries, and had it not been for the representative in South Carolina, whose name escapes me, and I don't know why, because he's my wife's favorite.
James Clyburn.
Had it not been for Clyburn saving Biden's butt, I don't know if Biden would have survived another race. So the question now we were talking about was where does Bernie fit in that situation? And had he won the primary, would he have won a potential race against Trump? Go ahead, guys. Your thoughts.
It would have been fascinating because you would have had left-wing populism, that's hard to say, versus right-wing populism. And that's not a matchup we've seen in American politics at the national level anyway. But I'll tell you what happened in 2020 and Biden suddenly going from his tail between his legs to the clear favorite for the nomination is the Democratic Party was in a panic, not that Bernie would lose, but that Bernie would win. Because Bernie threatened the Democratic power broker base. He would have yanked the rug out from under them. They would have rather lost with Biden or anybody else than to have Bernie win and go to the Democratic Party's power brokers and say, okay, you can all go home. You're all out of here now. Your sweetheart deals and your taxpayer-funded summer homes are over. And they were panicked about it.
Yeah, it's a Trump version of on the left. I think that's why so many GOP were so against Trump as well. I mean, I left the GOP when Trump was nominated in 2015 because I was worried about the same thing a lot of people were. And then I voted for him in 2020 because he was 3 for 3 on Supreme Court justices, which is my, one thing I vote on. And so I think Greg, you make a great point that, being the populist, I don't see Bernie going towards the middle. And we know Trump isn't going to move from whatever we want to call it, Trumpism. So, yeah, I do think Trump wins in that situation simply because Bernie doesn't big tent it enough. I think because he is such a leftist that in 2020, where we're starting to see kind of now the polling is a little bit more, people are more willing to accept some of the leftist, what is leftist ideas under progressivism. I don't think that in 2020 we were at that point where they would. And in America, progressive, it's all relabeling. It's words, right? It used to be liberal and now it's progressive and leftist. But now liberal and leftist are not the same thing like they used to be 50 years ago. And so it would have been really interesting. I think the media, of course, would have fell in line right behind Bernie, like good little media do. And not to throw Greg into this, but just as media, I do want to say that Greg is a phenomenal Substack. So if you haven't gone on to Substack and subscribed and become a follower of Gregg Easterbrook and TMQ and all predictions wrong. So by the way, any predictions that Gregg makes, guaranteed that they're going to be wrong, or at least can be wrong. Solid card. I love it.
I keep my promises. My predictions are always wrong.
All right. So speaking of that, I'm glad you guys are amazing at segueing. So here we go. First topic of the night. Lance had brought up one of your columns where you was talking about Marx Was Right. And we had a little bit of a discussion about it, but I kind of wanted, Lance, you can go ahead and take the lead on that. And then just Greg, kind of give us some feedback on that.
Well, I think we should start with Greg's point from the article. Greg, why don't you tell us what Marx was right about, and then I'm going to push back a little bit on some of the things.
The basic point of, remember during the debates, Trump called Kamala Harris a Marxist.
Yeah.
And she clearly is a Marxist. So is Trump. Marxism is the core philosophy of Western governments in this sense. If you look at the Communist Manifesto from 1848, 9 of the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto have been adopted by the United States and the European Union. We're doing what Marx wanted done, with only one exception. And we're doing things that Marx would have considered close to inconceivable. Marx wanted a central bank controlled by federal government. We've got that. All the European nations have that now. Marx would have been stunned to discover that the capitalists and labor organizers were willing to sign a peace treaty, which we call organized labor. It's fundamentally a peace treaty. He thought there could never be peace between those two factions, and now there is, and it's mutually beneficial in most cases to both of them. Marx thought that there would never be child labor laws. We've had child labor laws for 100 years. Marx was a Malthusian. He thought society would run out of food, and that eventually we'd have to be drafting people into an army to try to improve soil. He didn't know high yield agriculture was coming. Yeah. So all these problems in a way that he didn't know could happen. The only plank of the Communist Manifesto. Oh, and here's the key one. I got to remember, be sure I don't forget this. Marx hated immigration. He wanted immigrants put in prison and all of their property confiscated. He would have fit right in with Fox News. Marx could have had a Fox News show called Carl's Corner, where he fulminates against getting rid of those immigrants and deporting them to El Salvador and locking them up. He was totally with Fox News on that. The one plank of the Communist Manifesto that we didn't adopt was the abolition of inheritance. He wanted on death all property owned by an individual to forfeit to the state. And we kind of tax estates here in the United States. We tax them very lightly. Some of the European Union countries tax them very lightly. But basically, you can still accumulate vast wealth down through family generations. And that's the fact that you can still accumulate vast wealth in family groups is one of the main sociological distinctions in the United States today. Because you look at the black-white gap, the education gap is declining, the pay gap is declining, marriage statistics have normalized, become about the same between the two groups. The one thing that's totally different is family net worth. Whites have much more family net worth than blacks do, and we're not taxing it. And so it's going to grow, not shrink.
Yeah, KJ and I have actually talked about that quite a bit on the money and the black dollar being kept in the black community is not happening. He definitely educated me on that a few times. So, Greg, what's your thought on, is there a difference then between in the Communist Manifesto and Marxism versus Leninism and Maoism, where the collective becomes the government and the collectivization of, let's say, farms is probably the easiest one, the non-land ownership? Because my understanding is Marx thought that was the way to go, is that it would be the collective. And then we saw how the Leninists basically, for all intents and purposes, made that one of the largest death knells in the history of the 20th century, is by making the yoke of
the three greatest killers in human history. One is Hitler, of course. The other two are Stalin and Mao. And they perverted Marxism into a philosophy of dictatorship and to an anti-human philosophy, that a rationalization for mass murder. Marx was not a violent person. He was pretty crazy. He had a lot of eccentricities, and he turned out to be wrong about many things, most prominently food supply. But he didn't want violence. He would have been horrified if he saw what Stalin did to people in Ukraine in the 1930s, for example, or what Mao did during the Great Leap Forward. That would have horrified him.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that kind of gets lost to history, is the difference between what, and this is not, I am not defending Karl Marx by any stretch, but the idea that Marx was basically, we're going to set up the government, we're going to set it up for each according to their need, and then humans are going to take over, and then the government is going to step back and eventually dissolve. That was the idea Marx had, and you saw Lenin. And I don't think we ever had a government that has willfully given up power once they've become a dictatorship, that they said, yeah, this just isn't for me anymore.
It's pretty damn rare. One of the reasons George Washington should be a hero to all of us is he was very rare in voluntarily surrendering great power. Yeah. He could have been president as long as he wanted, and he said, nope, somebody else should take this job now. And it set a good precedent that's mainly lasted.
Well, didn't Washington, I thought they proposed that he would be the new King George. Isn't that correct?
At one point, there was a proposal to crown him, but he was never interested in wearing a crown.
I knew he wasn't interested, but I knew there were people that wanted to draft him into that position. Yeah. So, with Marxism, I think that's part of the problem is when you go into the philosophy of how things are versus how they actually are practiced. And to keep it a little more modern, that was one of the biggest critiques that you saw in the Obama administration from the right is, hey, we have all these college professors. We have these people that are based in philosophy and theory, and they've never done this before. And so anytime things went wrong, it was an easy C. They don't know what they're talking about. Meanwhile, currently we have people that have experience that maybe not enough experience that seem to be shooting themselves in the foot every so often.
Experience is such a very loose word, but for respect, out of respect of our guests, I will not belabor that point. You know how I feel about that. But anyway, next topic: how's your citizens and your judges? So, Greg, my esteemed co-host, don't like when I use the F word when I talk about this regime, right? But when you start to take away journalistic rights, when you start to lock up, citizens and hide them away in offshore prisons, and then now you start to lock up judges, it's starting to look real effy to me. And my co-host does not agree with me. So what are your thoughts in regards to the way the administration is behaving? I call it fascism light because we're not fully there. And my co-host says, well, because it's not traditional fascism, we're not there. And I'm like, well, yeah, they did it wrong the first time. So everybody learns from mistakes. That's why they're evolving and making it better. But what are your thoughts? I'm curious to hear.
I'm all in for deporting convicted criminals.
Yeah, absolutely.
Convicted of something, you should be deported. It's certainly possible that you can deport people who have entered this country illegally. Barack Obama deported almost 1 million illegal immigrants. It's a big change in the Democratic Party that now they love illegal immigrants. They didn't used to. If you break our laws to enter the country, you got no complaint if you're deported. Absolutely. But if you've got some kind of normalized status here, people with green cards or who are married to American citizens or who have received some kind of refugee status, they have to receive due process before anything happens to them. And if you can take away due process from disfavored people, how long until you take it away from the majority too?
Yeah.
I think my argument is that you can't use the exception for the norm. Right, so we're talking about the Maryland man. I know that's how he's been labeled. That's what he's become the cause du jour. But then you have the Maryland senator who he gets in. He has all the people behind him. He says, and his wife's here, and his wife was over here. He didn't know who the wife was. So then It's like, okay, how sincere are you really? Yes, you might turn the wrong way, and I'm not saying there shouldn't be due process. I've never said that. But my whole thing is, if you're here as a guest of the United States government, at any point the United States government can say you're not welcome here anymore if there's a cause, for any real cause. People get mad at what's going on in Colombia and some of the Ivy League schools, those that are supporting the Palestinians. I remember not too long ago when if you were supporting a terrorist organization, you could get kicked out of the country because you were supporting a terrorist organization. And the last time I checked, Hamas is still labeled as a terrorist organization. And I don't want to re-adjudicate what's going on in Israel and Palestine, but if you're blocking students, especially Jewish students, on a campus like just last week, we saw a video out of Yale where the Palestinian supporters, and just for the record, this is my own personal thought. If you're in any type of a protest and you're wearing a mask to hide who you are, you're not a good person. If you are proud of what you're doing, and that's why I think what are the National Front, the guys in the khakis and all that, I think that's a load of crap. I don't think that I think it's a good likelihood they were federal. They were federal provocateurs because they've pretty much gone away. But if you are here as a guest of the United States government and you do something that is supporting a regime that is goes against not only our values, but against one of our, and people can say, well, Israel, just because they're against Israel, well, they should have that right. Yeah, you can absolutely have that right. You can have that right back in your country where you have every right to have it. And so go ahead.
Well, I'd say that people who enter the United States, there's three ways to enter: the fully lawfully, on a temporary basis as a student visa, tourist visa, work visa, or illegally. People who enter illegally, I don't care about it. I want to send them home. Yeah. If I entered another nation illegally, they'd send me home. So we should be doing the same thing here. People who have entered lawfully on a temporary basis, and green cards are temporary, they can be revoked. They don't make you a citizen. Yep. They get due process. The Constitution is clear on that. If you do something bad, say you become an anti-Semite at Columbia University, where they're practically handing out prizes for anti-Semitism now, you get a hearing before we send you home. That's really clear in the Constitution. 14th Amendment, one of its great achievements, due process sometimes is just stall tactics. But the 14th Amendment, creating the due process right, is one of the reasons the United States became a better society. And that right was extended to everyone who was within the borders of the United States, even to criminals.
So I want both of you guys to kind of chime in on how that plays out with the what's the Attorney Bundy going after the judge who allegedly, I guess she snuck an illegal immigrant out the back door.
Yep.
And they arrested the judge. What are your thoughts on that? I think that's a little, I understand it, but I think arresting judges is a slippery slope. It is a slippery slope, and it's crossing a line that's only been crossed a few times in American history. A judge can commit a crime. A judge can do something unethical. Judges are not, most judges I think are pretty virtuous, but if they commit a crime, they should be prosecuted too. In the case of the Wisconsin judge, it is odd to think that we think of Wisconsin as this happy little state of dairy farmers. It's become the most politically tumultuous state in the country in recent years. And I have followed this pretty closely. My older brother is a federal appellate judge who has jurisdiction over Wisconsin. So he's also always handling these crazy cases. The judge who was arrested is a state judge. So her case probably will not end up in federal court. But you got to say, if a judge commits a crime, nobody's above the law. A judge should be prosecuted. Now she's got to defend herself in court and show that she did not commit a crime. But it is crossing a line that's by general agreement of both political parties. You don't go after judges, in part because you don't want the judges to be angry at your party when you're caught in corruption. You want the judges to look the other way on you. If you go after them, they may not look the other way. But I'll tell you what this all builds up to. You've heard in the last 2 months, you've heard the phrase constitutional crisis used a lot. Absolutely. I'm not sure there is a constitutional crisis right now, but there could be one coming. If you look at the history of the White House and the federal courts, we think it's unprecedented that Trump is ignoring federal court orders. Actually, this happens all the time. We just don't pay attention to it because it's usually on minor procedural issues. Biden defied a lot of orders. Obama defied a lot of orders. It was usually procedural stuff. Nobody cared. Now suddenly everybody's decided to care. If push comes to shove and the Supreme Court tells Trump, you must do X, Y, Z, and Trump says, no, I won't, then we'll have a genuine constitutional crisis.
Yeah, and one of the points I've made with that is the irony of this is the legislature makes the laws, the judiciary interprets the constitutionality of the laws, and the executive enforces the laws. So if the legislature passes a law and the judiciary says it's constitutional, hey, you have to enforce this, and the executive goes, no, what are they going to do? Who's going to go in and enforce the law on the enforcers?
That's the big question of a genuine constitutional crisis. If the White House went to war with the Supreme Court, who would win? It's not clear who would win. The strongest hand is always held by Congress because Congress can alter laws. The president can write executive orders, but the next president just tears them up. They're nowhere near as strong as laws are. Judges can issue injunctions and issue stays and things like that, but somebody else can another judge can just tear them up. Congress is holding the trump card, and not to make a bad pun. And right now, so far, Congress has been completely inactive. A lot of the things that the White House and the federal judiciary are arguing about, Congress could resolve by simply clarifying the law, and they don't want to do it because they want to be able to blame somebody else for what's going on.
Exactly.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Congress doesn't want to do their job?
I shouldn't have used that.
No. You are right on point. I am all for. Speaking of which, term limits. That brings up a good point. I mean, it's going to take us off a little bit, but how do you feel about term limits? I am definitely pro term limits at every level. SCOTUS level, congressional level. Obviously, we have it for the POTUS, but I believe no one should be there forever. And then you start to see people whose net worths are continuously exploding during their time serving the people. It just further strengthens my point that, hey, man, you should not be there forever. Do some time, and then I need you to come out so we can get some fresh voices and generational takes. You know what I'm saying? Because every generation ages out, right?
Yeah.
And I think right now, what we have in Congress is we have everybody that's been there forever has generationally aged out. And the young people that we have in there are grifters who are looking, they saw the opportunity to cash in, and they saw that Congress is the easy cash cow. So a lot of them aren't in there to serve the people. They're in there to serve their pockets. I'll leave that to you guys. What are your thoughts?
Just because Elon Musk says something doesn't mean it's wrong. So when Elon Musk points out the number of people who are long-serving members of the House and Senate, whose net worth is spectacularly increased, even though they're on a public servant's salary and don't have any other visible source of income, there's corruption there. And you ask yourself, we're running up these fantastic federal debts. Spending keeps increasing. Where are the new bridges? Where are the new roads? Where are the new schools? Where are the new hospitals? A lot of that money is being stolen by members of Congress. And that's why members of Congress try to keep their heads down a lot of the time, because as Elon Musk says, they don't complain about criminals because they themselves are criminals. Now, I certainly don't mean every member of Congress. There are some people of very high ethical standing in both chambers of the United States Congress. But you look at Nancy Pelosi's net worth. Don't tell me, oh, my husband invested wisely. Come on, we weren't born yesterday. And I'll give you a statistic that blows me away. 16% of the American public is at least 65 years of age. 80% of Senate committee chairmen are at least 65 years of age. The aging is wildly overrepresented in the United States Congress. And whose fault is that? Our fault. We should vote those people out of office.
Yeah. I saw somebody, I don't remember which congressman said this or where I read it, but it was almost identical to something I came up with. Shoot, Greg, it might have been in one of your columns. I said about 15, 20 years ago, I used to be against term limits simply because every election is a term limit. But then I realized that the American people and the electorate is stupid. So you need to have these term limits, and it should be very simple. In the House, it should be 6 years. In the White House, 8 years. In the Senate, 12 years. And SCOTUS should be 18 years, and they should be slotted in, one every 2 years. So it doesn't matter who it is. The third person in the Supreme Court is after 6 years. And let's say that person passes away with still 6 years. Well, the nomination goes forward, and that person gets slotted in right there to number 3. So after 3 years, they're out. And that way it's constantly going through. I think that would solve so many of the problems with this person's a Democrat nominee. This one's a Republican nominee, and the turnover, because right now, the money that's involved in the elections as well is just for a pun, it's criminal. But literally, I think it's criminal as well. But not just the dark money, but even the forward money.
And
because if I wanted to run for Congress, I simply couldn't. I don't have the money. I would have to have somebody immediately come in and say, okay, you're in Georgia, the Georgia 10th. I think I'm in the 10th district. We calculate you're going to need somewhere around $2 to $2.5 million. Well, great. Who's going to give me $2.5 million? And then the other side of it that blows me away, I don't know how many people know this. Let's say somebody came in and said, okay, we're going to back you for $2.5 million. And I say, great, I'm going to go run. And then I spend up, let's say I spend $50,000. You know what happens to the rest of the money? I get to keep it.
And Lance, when you get elected, and I'm sure you'll get elected, you're gonna win handily. When you get elected, if you're like most current members of Congress, your first day in office, what do you start doing? Fundraising for yourself. You're not going down to listen to the debates. You're not studying the issues. You're fundraising.
Yeah, KJ and I have brought up there's a movie Eddie Murphy called The Distinguished Gentleman, where he ran because he had the same name as the representative who had died. And so Eddie Murphy, it's one of KJ's favorite movies. So that's the type of stuff that happens. And Eddie Murphy wins the election in that movie just based off of name recognition. That tells you the stupidity of people. If I'm willing to, if I go in and I say, I'm going to vote for, now again, as a conservative, I'm not a Republican. I am a conservative. I am not voting for Mitch McConnell year after year after year. Now, people might not like, let's say, Mike Lee. I like Mike Lee. He's a conservative. I see what he does. People don't like it because he is a conservative. Fine, cool. But I do. And that's how I'm going to vote. But once he starts going against what I think are my best interests as a constituent, I'm not voting for him anymore. Well, and I'm not in Utah anymore, so I'm not going to vote for him that way either.
Cool.
But it's ridiculous.
Okay. All right. We got to keep the ball moving, gentlemen. We can definitely have an entire episode on that, because that is very yeah. So here we go. Journalism in crisis. So recently we saw an Atlantic and senior editor from the Atlantic, good Lord, resign. And then also Jake Tapper in his book on Biden on how he revealed all these secrets, but was astoundingly quiet during the administration. Some of it sounded extremely damning to the president, like falling asleep in meetings and that sort of thing. I guess the question would be, if you knew that information beforehand, don't you think as a journalist, or how do you feel as a journalist having a responsibility to put that information out in the best interest of people? Because if my president is falling asleep in meetings and is clearly deteriorating, but the message isn't getting out there, I think I deserve to know as a voter. That's going to affect the way I vote. What do you guys think?
Well, I think mainstream journalism is mainly left-wing, not entirely, of course. There's a Wall Street Journal and Fox News. Mainstream journalism is mainly on the left. Performed astonishingly poorly on the left. Really, for a decade, they performed poorly with the Russia collusion hoax against Trump in 2017. In retrospect, it was totally a hoax. And I think a lot of the big news organizations always knew it was a hoax, and they pretended that it wasn't. They performed incredibly poorly with on the key story of the relationship between China and the outbreak of COVID. The two factors to that: the relationship of China and the fact that the United States government was funding the experiments in China. They pretended all that stuff didn't exist. They pretended Hunter's laptop didn't exist and tried to retaliate against the New York Post. They successfully retaliated against the New York Post for reporting that story because it didn't fit their agenda. And then it all built up to what for the Democratic Party was a calamity, that they hid the truth about Biden's actual mental condition and physical condition too. Now, at his age, it's no surprise that he was declining. Most people do at that age. But the fact that there was an elaborate cover-up run by journalists, the kind of people whose job it is to communicate the truth to the public, were trying to prevent the public from knowing the truth. the journalism business deserves the decline of public respect that it's experiencing right now.
I think that's why people are turning to alternative media, such as X.
Well, I got to tell you, it's been great for Substack. Substack has only existed for 5 years, and as of about a month ago, many of your listeners may not even know what Substack is. It's a media alternative where you subscribe to an individual rather than to an organization. That's the big difference. You pick the writers, or in some cases the artists that you like, and you support them, not an organization. But as of a month ago, Substack has more paid subscribers than the New York Times and the Washington Post combined. And it's not a big corporation. There's a couple of guys in a small office building in San Francisco pressing the technical buttons. Substack has 92 employees, and it has already more reach than many of the main journalism organizations in the United States. And it's not the only alternative organization, but it's one that's, I think, pretty well balanced and pretty factual. And the big deal media types are amazed that we've pulled the tablecloth off the table without upsetting the glasses and the plates, because we're doing it every day, basically.
So, Greg, I have a question for you. You wrote for the Atlantic for a long time.
I did, yes, for 30 years. 38 years, actually. Sorry, 38.
Okay. So the current editor-in-chief, Jeffrey Goldberg, accidentally gets put onto a chat. Now, we're not going to go into the legality of the chat itself. We're staying away from that. But he knew he was mistakenly put on a Signal group because he had the same initials as an administrative, somebody in the administrative. So
Right.
he knew he didn't belong in that. What are your thoughts on him sitting back and gathering? Now, I don't mind him if he right up front had said, "Hey, I was included in the Signal," like immediately, and I told him I'm not supposed to be in there. So that just tells you how messed up they are. They put me on this. But he sat back for 3 days and gathered information. Now, did he have a legal obligation to disclose he was there? No. Did he have an ethical and journalistic? Should he have stayed on?
Well, I'd answer this way, and I'm someone who's disagreed with Jeff about many things. I don't like the direction that he's taken the Atlantic in. I don't like some of the opinions he's expressed. I think he handled himself properly in this case. His explanation, and I take him at his word, was that he first started getting this chat stuff. He didn't believe it was real. He thought he was being spoofed by somebody. If you or I started getting chats from the National Security Advisor, would we believe that it was real? It's some high school kid messing with me. Only when the bombs went off in Yemen did he say, "Holy shit, this is real." And 24 hours later, he disclosed everything. I think he handled himself just about right.
Yeah, so he wasn't the son of an NFL coach who was
No.
calls to a prospective quarterback.
There's definitely nothing NFL about Jeff Goldberg.
So, and what are your thoughts on the handling of the administration in the press pool, with being able to like kicking out the AP? I understand you can have disagreements with news outlets, right? But I'm also a fan of free journalism. Like, just because I disagree with you and I know you're going to put out a hit piece, I don't think it's right to restrict access. That's just my own personal opinion. What are you guys' thoughts?
Well, I don't like the fact that the Trumpsters are so hostile to the press, but I think that's their choice to make. Everybody knows that they're hostile to the press. I think it's healthy for the press to be intensely scrutinized. There's no right to sit in the White House press room. Each administration gets to pick who they admit. And traditionally, the administrations of both parties have admitted the primary power brokers. But if the Trump people want to admit independent web-based journalists, that's their choice to make. I think they've got to balance it by making sure there's always somebody from the press pool, whether Associated Press or Washington Post. The press pool has always got to have a representative near the president. That's just for democracy to function properly. But if most of the people who are near the president are independents who do podcasts, for example, that's Trump's choice to make. And if President Ocasio-Cortez is sworn in 2029. She will get to choose who gets to be close to her. I don't have any problem with that.
And that's kind of where my argument has been, is that you don't have a right to be in the White House press room. Otherwise, where's my press pass? And where do you?
Yeah, there is no right. I think every president has an obligation to ensure that there is a press pool reporter nearby at all times. For the president owes that to the public. As long as that obligation is being observed, the rest of it's up to him.
Yeah,
I guess my question with the real quick. I guess my question with the AP is, because the AP has pushed such a political agenda with things like calling males females and saying, "Hey, we're going to go by what they call themselves," and the Trump administration saying, "Well, no. I mean, if you're not going to be honest about the sexual, I don't even know how we're doing it nowadays. It's not gender. It's not, whatever the anatomical genitalia somebody has. If you're going to lie about that, then why should I trust you about anything else?" And I've seen plenty of stories, and especially from the right, I see that. This trans person did this, and she, and then I'll see in the comments going, "You mean he, that's a dude." And so to me, I look at that and go, I'm kind of like Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson has said, if a student comes to me and says, "Hey, Dr. Peterson, I'd really appreciate it if you called me Jennifer. That's how I identify. And so if you would call me that, I'd really appreciate it." He says, "Yeah, absolutely, no problem." His problem is when the law turns around in Canada and says, "You will say she," and that's how he came to the forefront of the intellectual dark web, is by saying, "No, as law, why am I going to? You can't force me to do that." And I think that's where the problem becomes, is the AP is saying, "Well, we don't give a crud what you're going to say in the White House." So the White House says, "Okay, well, if you're not going to follow the very basic rules that we're putting out here," the AP just came out with one a couple weeks ago. They will capitalize when talking about racial. They'll say black is with a capital B, but white with a lowercase b. Well, why? Or I'm sorry, white with a lowercase w. Well, why? If you're going to be a news organization, puts things out and says, "This is how we're going to do it," and it might have been the AP, the AP guidebook that did it instead of AP. And if I'm conflating the two, I'm sorry, but if you're going to say we're going to do it one way for one group, but a different way for a different group, why are we doing this? Like, are we not going to just have a standard, stick with the standard, and go from there? And if the AP is not willing to do that, I have no problem with them losing their special place in the Pentagon. They're not. There's no right to that space in the Pentagon.
There's a huge amount of groupthink at the top of journalism, and groupthink tends to veer to the left. And you don't want to be the person who says, "Well, Jennifer, okay, I'm going to call that person wants to be known as Jennifer. Fine, that's what Jennifer wants. That's what we're going to call her." But not just AP, but many New York Times is this way. They want you to believe that if a man declares himself a woman, then the man becomes a woman, and that doesn't make any sense. It's one thing. I'm talking about adults, not minors here. An adult male wants to dress as a woman. That's, as long as you're not hurting anybody, that's your choice. Yep. But you don't become a woman. That doesn't make any sense at all. So I take your point that if Associated Press or any other news organization is willing to confidently say something that they know to be a lie, what else are they lying about?
I agree. The only thing I have an issue with is the vetting process. The Trump press pool has been caught several times with Russian state-sanctioned reporters inside of their press point. Just recently, the influencer who was literally paid to put out pro-Russia propaganda was granted access to the presidency. And then the incident before that, you literally had a Russian state media reporter sitting right beside the press secretary. I don't have an issue with who you let in there, but there has to be a vetting process. We can't allow.
Why?
What do you
Here's
mean
why I say why. Here's why I say why. If Al Jazeera sends a reporter, should we not allow the Al Jazeera, because Al Jazeera is clearly antagonistic towards the United States, but we shouldn't let them in?
There was a period where the State Department was encouraging people in Washington to cooperate with Al Jazeera. because they felt that Al Jazeera was making a legitimate attempt to present the American point of view. I was at the Brookings Institution for some time, and our press guidance from Brookings said whenever Al Jazeera calls, treat them with respect and answer their questions because we think they're trying to be a responsible news organization. And we all said fine. Now, I think since October of 27, that's changed. But until it changed, I didn't have any problem working with Al Jazeera. And I'll tell you my knowledge of how the vetting works. I never held a White House press pass, so I don't know how that vetting works. But for 30 years, I held the United States Congress press pass. There's a thing called the periodical press gallery in the Senate where you have to go to apply for that pass. It was pretty damn rigorous. I had to disclose a lot about my personal life in order for them to issue me a press pass. If I had been up to anything, they would have figured it out. So the same level of scrutiny should apply to anybody who's getting a White House press pass.
That's all I got. I completely agree. All right, Greg, we got you for a couple of minutes left, so we're gonna do a rapid fire.
Okay.
What are your grades for the first 100 days? I think we're a little past 100 days now of the administration. What are your thoughts, your grades, and where do you see this administration going?
I like the fact that Trump is going after the deadwood in Washington and the entrenched assumptions about, just because we've always spent on this program, therefore we should spend even more on this program. I like the fact that he's doing that. I think he's shooting from the hip way too much. And we're seeing him, especially with tariffs. Tariffs are a terrible idea. There's like 11 economists in the entire world who want more tariffs. Tariffs have always harmed both countries, and they're harming both countries here. He's got to pull back from it. He shot from the hip way too much with tariffs. Otherwise, I like the fact that he's streamlining government. I like the fact that he's I don't like the fact no one individual you want to see laid off, but you know the theory of management consulting that any organization can take a 5% staff cut. Any organization will be improved by a 10% staff cut. It's when you exceed 20% that you start to damage the organization. So if he gets, like the State Department now is talking about a 15% cut, that's tampering with the area where you damage the organization instead of helping it. So he's shot from the hip too much. He's got to pull back. But I like the fact that he's been aggressive. That Washington is designed to resist change on almost every level. And change is sometimes healthy.
I agree.
Real quick with tariffs. If the point of the tariffs with China specifically are to try to force China to be an honest broker, is it worth at least the attempt, even if it hurts in the short term?
Yeah, if there's a plan, if he's not just doing whatever pops into his head, if the plan is to get China to bargain seriously for true free trade between the United States and China, then that'll be a huge success and everybody will be really happy about it. Is that really the plan? I don't know.
I think they're calling it 5D chess now. The supporters are saying he's playing 5D chess. Mr. Easterbrook, as always, man, it is an absolute pleasure and an honor to have you on the show. We wanted to cap you at 45 minutes, so we are right at that 43:30 time frame. So thank you so very much for.
Hey, you got to mention the name of my Substack. It's called All Predictions Wrong.
Absolutely. Please do. Anything you want. I was just going to say, anything you want to promote, you got the last minute. It's all yours, good brother.
Well, I urge people to look for my last name on Substack. It's a quirky Substack. Half of what I publish is public policy and actually theology commentary. I'm big on the latter. The other half is football. Many of your audience would know the name Tuesday Morning Quarterback. Tuesday Morning Quarterback is back, and it's on Substack. And right now, the football isn't being played, but it was once the season starts, it'll be every Tuesday on Substack again. And it's a quirky product, but a lot more people than I ever thought are paying for it. So it's going pretty well.
You're going to have a post-draft TMQ, correct?
On Tuesday, yeah. I'm finishing it right now.
I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait to see what you think about, or what you say about Sanders, because you didn't draft him in your mock draft.
I didn't draft any real players in my mock draft. They were all made up.
I know.
I like Sanders as a college player. He's going to be a success in the NFL. And I think he's the first example of a reverse Nepo baby, he was penalized for having a famous father. If he would, instead of being Shader Sanders, if his name was Sam Johnson, he would have gone in the first round.
I agree. I think we can let it
as
at
a
right.
BYU fan who watched BYU defense absolutely destroy Colorado, I had my doubts. So we'll see who's right in 5 years.
Okay, we will.
All right, Mr. Easterbrook, thank you so very much for hanging out with us,
Absolutely.
man.
Thank you, guys.
All right, till next time, brother. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye. All right, here we go.
We're gonna keep going though, just in case anybody's worrying. Like we're only going.
We are rocking and
We
rolling.
were
Yeah,
just letting Gregg go after 45. Hey,
that is
KJ.
correct.
Oh,
Yep. Let me see.
there we go. I was
There
gonna
we go.
say.
There we go.
I
All
like
right,
that. There we go.
All right. So now we have to open it up. So we got 45 minutes. I want to talk to you because it has been a while, and I have to talk to you about my favorite, I guess. What is it called? Administrative pick. The Secretary of Defense of the United States. Who cannot seem to keep his antics out of the news cycle. What are your thoughts? I know initially when we first heard about his pick, I was like, hey man, the guy's not ready. And then so far, he is acting like a captain who's never been in command. I mean, his nose is he's focused on enlisted stuff, worried about the fitness of the troops, worrying about uniform, stuff like that. That's not a commander's responsibility. And he's getting his hand slapped too much for this signal. But every week it seems is another incident with signal. This last week was he had a gray line ran to his computer in the Pentagon because the cell signal was shoddy. I don't know if he's gonna survive the entire term because Trump doesn't like chaos. Trump does not like messiness, right?
Like blowback.
Yeah.
Like blowback.
And Hegseth just cannot see. Everyone else kind of rolls with the flow and they have their hiccups here and there. But Hegseth he's that one friend that you always have to be like, hey, I'm going out with so-and-so. And your wife kind of gives you that look like, are you okay? You know what I mean? He just gives me frat boy mentality for a 50-year-old. And that's not, I don't mean that as a compliment.
Few thoughts on him. Now, I am not as focused on him as you are. So I honestly, if you say he did something, I'm not going to say, oh, what? He didn't? I don't know. I will say this. The idea that they put a nipper line into his office so he could use whatever kind of strikes me as not a real story. I was stationed at the NSA as a chaplain with an intel unit for 3 years. Now, before that, if you don't know my background, I was an intel analyst for 10 years before that. I've had a TSSCI since about 2000. Well, I first applied in 2005 when I switched over. So I think it was originally granted in like 2006 or something. So I don't want to misrepresent. But during that time as an intel analyst, I saw one piece of live TSSCI. That's it. One piece. I was at the Air National Guard in Alabama during drill. They had a drone footage going. I was like, oh, look. Oh, it says top secret SCI up there. Oh, that's real top secret stuff. Ooh. I mean, it was nothing. It was a drone footage from, 3,000 feet up, just circling some little outpost in Afghanistan. So it didn't really mean anything. And then as a chaplain, when I finally got onto the NSA side, I walked in and I go to my desk and I'm like, all right, here's your nipper computer. Here's your TSSCI computer, your top secret computer. Here's how you switch it. I went, what do you mean? What? Like I literally can click a button, log in and put Iran. And it will say, here's the search. And I probably should have learned how to manipulate the search engine better than I did. But I could see stuff right off the bat. Here's TSSCI stuff, no foreign, and all these different things. It's like, oh wow, I lived in Taiwan for 2 years. What's Taiwan and China and some of these things. But I did have the nipper line right there. So I don't think that that's the case, that he didn't have a nipper line in his office. I have a hard time believing that would be like somebody saying, hey, he had a satellite dish put onto the Pentagon so he could watch Fox News.
No.
All those guys have TVs in
Right.
their
The issue isn't that he had a gray line. The issue is he had the gray line put on his computer to type on Signal and then text his mother top secret plans. Like he for whatever reason, he cannot grasp the concept of who needs to know. Right. So far, he's tried to get his wife a secret clearance. And then now it comes out that he's texting his mother. Like his brother has some kind of leeway because he is a director of like he's in the Department of Homeland Security. So
is he?
Yeah. So to text him on to text top secret information on Signal is a no-go, first and foremost. But when you're talking to your brother who is also in the intel adjacent, all right, cool. But the problem I have is when you're texting your mother and your sister and your cousin, people who have absolutely no business with this information, and you cannot seem to stop it. So the first time I'm like, okay, cool. Signal gate on the plane, whatever. I got it. He put in the wrong guy. Then it's like, yo, now you're texting your wife and your brother.
That wasn't Hegseth though. That was somebody else who set up the wrong one.
Yeah, somebody set it up, but it was Hegseth who was doing the texting of the top secret plan. So
I think.
Well, hold on.
Yeah,
so let me finish. So that first one, all right, cool. I got it. Accidents happen. He thought the line was secure because somebody else set it up. Cool. But then you find out that he's now had a separate Signal chat after the fact with his brother and his wife, who has absolutely no security clearance. She doesn't even have a role in government. And you're like, all right, SecDef, you really got to chill out, bro. What's the problem? And then a week after that, you find out he's texting his mother top secret info. Like, what the hell, man?
I think you have a better argument with the texting his mom, who does not have a clearance and doesn't have need to know, than some of the others. And the reason I say that is you should have known better. I get that part, right? The argument is, well, if we're talking about this stuff, it's not top secret until it is, and who classifies it, all that stuff, right? So, if the question becomes who authorized Signal, apparently that was the Biden administration that said you can use Signal to have these cross conversations within the government, right? And there's definitely a should have known, like, hey, that's what spillage is by taking and everybody that's in government, everybody that deals with classified materials has to take these classes. Now, to be fair, a lot of people go click through the classes. I would hope that somebody in his staff, who's the S2 guy, is going into him saying, hey, look, we need to really have a real desk side conversation about this stuff. I do wonder, and again, this is not justifying, I don't know. I do wonder how much of these were all the same incident that is now being recycled 2 or 3 times. Like, or if they're different, and if they're different, again, there needs to be.
Yeah, they've already cleared that it was different. It was literally different.
These were different.
Threads.
These were different.
So, yeah,
no, not different paths.
Yeah. So initially we had the Signal Gate thing. That was one incident, right?
But that was the Houthis. That was the bombing of the Houthis. Okay.
Right. So then you had the Elon trying to get in on the China mission, which was all right on the China briefing.
But what did Hegseth have to do with that one?
Because he set
Let's
it
just
up.
stay with Hegseth first.
Yeah. This is Hegseth. Hegseth set up the meeting with Elon. He didn't clear it with President Trump. Trump didn't know that Elon was supposed to attend the brief. So Hegseth invited Elon to attend the top secret brief on China without informing the president. Because I gotta believe that the president would be like, nah, he don't need to be in there. All right, but that's
I don't know if that's true.
Well, no, it's true because it's true because they've already reported and vetted it. So that's 2.
No, that's not what I mean is, I don't know. Do you think that Trump, if Hegseth had gone to Trump and said, hey, I want to invite, I assume you want Elon in on this meeting, don't you think Trump at that point goes, well, yeah, of course.
Well, no, I can only go by what Trump said, and the POTUS said he didn't know. And if he had known, he would have told him not to invite him.
No, not that. Did Trump follow it up and say, if I had known?
Because the POTUS was asked about it, and he was like, no, I didn't know. But all right, cool. So that may just be
okay. Sorry, there's a lot.
But that's two. I got you, but that's two, right? So that's two separate incidents.
Yeah.
Then you get to the third incident of him texting his brother and his brother and his wife about intel meetings and some stuff that's going on. They didn't get into specifics on that. But then they released the fourth one with his mother. They just released those text messages. So you got four separate incidents where it's like, hey man.
What were the contents? Was it released what the contents of third and fourth were? Because I thought it was something where, like with the wife or whatever, it was the same information as the Houthi stuff. Is it different?
It could have been the same information, just in a different thread after it came out.
And so that's kind of where I wonder how much of this is getting recycled, because I read something about whistleblowers, and they were saying, hey, he also set this one up, but it was the same incident. So I don't know, but I will say this: as far as Trump goes, Trump seems like the type of person, because we have talked about his wanting to be the end all be all, right? He needs to be the one in charge. And so if they ask him and say, hey, did you authorize Hegseth to say this? Then, and Trump going, well, no, of course not. Is Trump then like, oh, I never would have allowed Trump being Trump? I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me if Trump at that point, well, no, of course not, I wouldn't let him. And realistically, if they had, would Trump have gone, well, yeah, sure, of course. So I don't know. It's just, but when if this becomes enough of a story, and obviously so far it hasn't, but when it becomes enough of a story that Trump starts looking at Hegseth going, dude, you're making me look bad, that's when Trump will cut him loose. Because as long as Trump believes that, and I think Trump has shown this, as long as Trump thinks that Hegseth is still good enough, because I think there's also that idea of Trump, I think, is a pretty loyal person as long as he feels like he's getting the loyalty back.
Well, his pick cost him a lot of political capital. He had to grease a lot of palms to get Hegseth over the finish. Yeah,
he did. And the irony of that is Matt Gaetz. I think he had to pick between him and Matt Gaetz, and Matt Gaetz decided to go, nope, pop smoke. I'm gonna go sit at. And I think Matt Gaetz, honestly, I think he thought he was going to get that senator seat in.
Florida.
DeSantis. Yeah. And DeSantis went, nah, I'm good.
Yeah.
I don't need somebody who's been accused of pedophilia as a senator. The accusation's enough for me to say I don't think that's a good idea. So good on DeSantis, by the way, for thinking that. Even if it's not true, there's a point where you go, and I've been accused falsely of stuff too. But there's a point where it's kind of like, depending on how bad it is, you kind of go, with what came out when you have Matt Gaetz going, well, no, I'm not a pedophile. Well, yeah, I paid prostitutes, but I'm not a pedophile. It's like, oh, dude, okay. So time out. You what now? So when Hegseth, and I think the other part of Hegseth is he because he did use so much capital, he's under that spotlight, that keg light really on him. And so even you said, look, during that meeting, he had his drink, and during he used something, he took a little sip, and it looked like, and I'm going, everybody does it. Like, you always see what I assume that. Now, if they'd been able to come back and say, hey, that was vodka, I would have been like, oh, you got to cut this dude loose. Well, I don't know what his sobriety has been like since.
There's been some reports that he has been having more celebratory drinks because of the stress. And listen, man,
he's
whatever
more comfortable doing it too. Then,
yeah, whatever you do, which is fine. You're a grown man, and I get it. You had to say what you had to say to get confirmed. Nobody believed that you would stop drinking once you got confirmed. But when it starts becoming more than a rumor that you're conducting interviews sauced, you know what I'm saying? Like squeaky wheels, after a while, you be like, all right, bro. The first time it's like, yeah, he used to be a drunk. But like when you're starting, like when Fox News starts to be like, hey, Peter, you okay? Like something should be pinging in your ear that, you know what I'm saying? you're probably a little too far into the juice.
Yeah. And I'll say this: unsubstantiated, completely unsubstantiated. There are a lot of people on the right who believe that Kamala Harris liked her vino quite a bit. Like it became a joke on Saturday Night Live, right? So I agree. When you're talking about anybody who is in a position of authority, that you have to worry about inebriation, because inebriation is something that alcohol's basically evil in a lot of ways. I'm not a fan. I've said before, I think alcohol is one of the most evil substances in the world. It doesn't do any good. And if you have to worry about your Secretary of Defense or any senior leader, I mean, this could go, like, realistically, as a chaplain, if I had a company commander whose soldiers came to me and said, "Hey, chaplain, man," or a first sergeant comes to me and goes, "My commander, man, I came in." I remember Sergeant First Class. This was back when I was an E5. Sergeant First Class, I found out he had a bottle in his drawer, and he would invite other E7s to drink after hours ish. Yeah. He may have been 1 or 2 shots in before the bell rang. And for me, I'm going, and I was the intel guy going, really? I mean, that's at what point do I take this to the command? I didn't, because it wasn't necessarily in my place, and from what I understood, it wasn't affecting his job. But at the same time, a few months later, he got charged with solicitation of a prostitute while he was TDY. Jesus. So my guess is he wasn't overtly sober when that phone call happened. So when you're talking about an E7 doing, if it's not okay for an E7 to be doing this, it's probably not okay for, the GS scale for civilians goes to GS 15. And I think the Secretary of the Defense is like a GS 37.
Yeah,
or whatever the number is. But again, until it becomes either Hegseth becomes unloyal to Trump, or there is enough splashback that Trump believes Hegseth is making him look bad, I think he will stick with him, because even though what you said was Hegseth shouldn't be worrying about the ACFT and shouldn't be worrying about height, weight, and all that. I would argue the exact opposite. That is what you want. Now, the difference is normally you get that from the command sergeant major of the Army, who's the one who's saying, "Hey, we need to make these changes." But the Army, I think, as a whole, now, and I will be very clear here, I am not in a contact with a lot of soldiers on post at the moment, because I'm in the retirement frame. I am not dealing with soldiers, but my guess is most soldiers who see this are probably pretty supportive of him still, because he's still talking a good game only about taking care of soldiers. Soldiers don't generally care about the politics of things. They want to look up and say, they want to see somebody going, "We need to take care of the soldiers." Now, they also don't really recognize a lot of times when that leader who is saying that is at the same time saying, turn around and stabbing him in the back before they kick him out the door. So I don't know, but I think in general, I think soldiers probably like that he is trying to be the frat guy, buddy. I don't think he's long for the position.
You're not in the threads, my brother. Let me tell you, as someone,
no, I don't do anything online.
Yeah, as someone who has his ear to the ground, they are very upset that they keep changing the APFT. That's not something a sec dev should want you. And again, that comes with experience. He hasn't served anything higher than company grade, so that's like you don't.
He was field grade. He was field grade.
No, he was acting field grade, and he was an acting field grade.
I thought he was a major. I thought he got
he never got major. He was a captain in a major slot. Yeah. So I mean, we gave the sergeant major VP pick shit for that, right?
That's why I said my bad.
That's what I'm saying. So as long as we keep it even. He never served in anything higher than a company grade position. So his thinking is company grade stuff, right? You don't have the garrison commander. Yeah, you don't have the garrison commander coming down to the unit level saying, hey, we got a problem with fatness and fitness and this, that, and the other. They're not there. They're not there, Chappie.
AJ, did we never have a battalion commander coming through the motor pool and saying, let me see exactly
but that's not what I said, though. That's not what I said. A battalion commander is supposed to care about the fitness of his troops because it directly impacts.
Okay.
But when you have the garrison commander, when you have the post commander coming to your unit,
okay.
Yeah, when you have a post commander coming to your unit saying, hey, we have a problem with fitness, you got a whole bunch of levels of commanders saying, hey, sir, we appreciate it, but yeah, check and Roger. I need you to go worry about the post, right? Because we got this down here. So when you have the Secretary of Defense, who is supposed to be on a strategic level coming down to the operational level, that's an issue. And it shows his inexperience and his inability to serve at that capacity. I'm all for shaking things up, but he lacks the experience to serve, and it's showing, and it's only going to get worse. He's making, you can say what you want, but he is making captain level, he's making lieutenant level mistakes, right? As a platoon sergeant, I have to tell my lieutenant, hey, sir, don't text our CONAP plan. Don't text our CONAP plans on signal. That's a bad idea. Hey, sir, don't use your phone when we're in the field. Hey, sir, you need noise and light discipline, right? Yeah. So now I have a Secretary of Defense who's acting like a lieutenant who doesn't have NCO support, right? Because if he had NCO support, or if he just listened to his NCOs, they would probably tell him, hey, sir, that's not a comment you need to make. You need to stay in your lane. Focus on this. And he's not listening to his. It's one thing to be inexperienced for a position. It's another thing to be inexperienced and not listen to your leadership. Every commander has a sergeant major for a reason, right?
Yeah.
They have a sergeant major for a reason. And right now, the SecDef is flying by the seat of his pants, and he's not taking wise counsel, and it's making everybody look bad. That's my point.
And that's what I was just about to say is what Greg was saying, that Trump is flying by the seat of his pants. I think Hegseth probably is doing that a little bit as well. And like for me, I mean, I tell you right now, and this is a drama of continued bang. If you're going to change the ACFT and you're going to make these stupid little changes, why? Until you get rid of the 2 mile run, I don't need a change. Get rid of the, you know what? It's like when we talk about if Trump gets rid of the term limits, then he will be the best. If Hegseth gets rid of the 2 mile run and makes it a 400-meter run with a kettlebell that simulates an ammo can or 200-yard run, I will say best SecDef ever.
That's the sentiment of the soldiers on the ground. They like, yo, dude, like you got rid of the wrong stuff. You know, you're taking away stuff, you're adding stuff, but you still got the 2 mile run left in. Why? You know what I'm saying? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah. Well, and like you just said, though, I mean, I don't know how much that's Hegseth going down and saying, hey, you guys need to figure something out, change it. But that's been happening. I mean, how many times since we first came into the military, you know, we both came in right around 2000. How many times has the ACFT, PRT, AFT, ACFT, I mean, how many times has this dumb thing changed? Like, I get evolving with the science in terms of, hey, sit-ups are actually pretty bad for your neck and back. I can personally attest to that. I'm hoping the VA recognizes how bad they are for my neck and back because 25 years in, I think sit-ups and push-ups did more on my back than just about anything, along with, you know, loaded down ruck marches and things like that. And I was never even in Afghanistan with the guys who were going on the full-on rucks, you know, the reason you train for ruck marches. But I think that Hegseth is, I don't want to say he's bulletproof. I think he's Teflon until the Teflon wears off. And once it starts sticking and Trump sees that it's sticking, he'll get replaced with a new pan.
Yeah, it's almost like you have the Joint Chiefs there. You're not listening to them. Like you're not doing it. Just I don't like the inexperience at that level, man. And I'll give you. I'm not really a fan of. I can't really say that I'm a fan of any pick so far. I mean, Cash is kind of like half and half. Like Cash, I'm like, all right, cool. So far ish. Still not cool with the wrestling judges, but I got it. I understand why. You know, it was political, but it was also. I mean, it was political, but it was also pointed, right? Like she broke the law. So
I look at it like this: if she was driving down the street doing 85 in a 45, she should have been arrested.
Yeah,
I mean,
I got
you're
it.
right. You or I get arrested for that. So
Yeah, but see, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. So on the surface,
I'll say
yeah.
this. Sorry about the administration, real quick. The cabinet. I think Rubio's done really well. I think more than not, they're actually been pretty solid. Simply because you're not seeing much about them. Like you're not supposed to know what is going on in the HUD department or what's going on in the you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
I'm
not really.
yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah.
I am with you.
So the squeaky wheel is going to get the noise. And right now, I don't know about the other cabinet members, but if I was a cabinet member, I'd be like, keep Hegseth, keep him, because he's going to be the guy that's taking every mistake he makes and everything. It's all going at him. And so
Yeah.
I can just do my job and just kind of not have to worry about it. And I can still show up in DC restaurants and nobody's going to know who I am. Because like I can pick out, I know who Linda McMahon is. I watched WWE 20 years ago. I know who she is now, though. If I saw Linda, I seen pictures of her. The first time I saw her, this last one, I went, is that what Linda McMahon looks like now? Oh, okay. I mean, so if I was a cabinet member, I'd be like, please keep him.
Yeah, whatever you do, keep Hegseth, because he is the shield for everyone. No, Liberty, Liberty, that's my point. I was saying she broke the law, so I understand why Director Patel arrested her. She did break the law. I don't have an issue with that. But what I'm saying is two things can be true at the same time. He arrested her because she broke the law. He also arrested her because he knew that her arrest would score huge political points, because he arrested her based off of a hot button issue. She was shuffling an illegal immigrant out the back door. So
who arrested her? Let me ask you this. Who arrested her?
Was it HHS? Noam's department.
Do you think? Okay, so DHS, Homeland Security, arrested her, or ICE? Okay, I don't know. So my question is, like, do you really think it went up to that where they called up and said, "Hey, FBI Director Patel, we want to arrest this judge because she had an illegal immigrant in her courtroom. She actively shuffled him through the courtroom, and on her way out, basically signed that he's innocent of all charges." Without, like, from what I read, even the prosecutors were like, "Wait, what now?"
She was arrested by the FBI.
Oh, she was arrested by the FBI. Okay, so, but on the way out, she's getting shuffled through. It's kind of like the other judge that just got arrested for harboring the gang members. Now, the judges might go, well, I saw something in these young people. I just think with the right kind. But at the same time, it's like, dude, you're a judge.
Yeah.
Did you really have a gang member living in your house? It's a bad look at the very least.
That's what I'm saying. Like I said, I'm not against her being arrested. But again, I also understand that the opportunity of the FBI arresting a judge will score huge, major political points. And it'll look good in the cycle, right? It looks good. It looks good in the news cycle, right?
What I've read, and to your point, I'm going to support you on this point. What I've read is that the biggest pushback I've seen from kind of the legal community is that going into the courthouse and arresting her in the courthouse.
Right. That was for the theater.
Yeah.
That was the theatrics of it, right?
And going in and arresting her at her house, say, hey, you know what, we've got this warrant for your arrest. Come on, let's do it. That probably, but like you just said, it's part of the show. And when you say one of the biggest hot button issues, and I don't think this is an understatement, illegal immigration got Trump elected.
Yeah.
I think it was probably the number. So if Trump turns around and Patel turns around and says, this is going to make Trump look really good. See, we're even going to get the judge.
Yeah.
And she's guilty if you read that now, allegedly, but if you read what she did, if what the indictment says is true, I mean, holy crap. But why, if you're Patel, why wouldn't you? You'd be like, yeah, if we're going to do this, let's make it look good. And so you can say it's not good. I don't think that's banana republic or fascist type stuff. I think by the same token, when you put yourself it's almost the exact opposite of you and I were discussing Judgment in Nuremberg, which, by the way, I'm guessing you didn't have a chance to watch yet.
I didn't know. Life
Okay.
is crazy.
I think there is a difference between a judge who is actively going out of their way to break the law,
Yep.
and a judge who kind of makes a bad decision. There was one in Utah a few weeks ago, a month or two ago, where it turned out that one of the judge and like the county prosecutors were sharing child porn with each other. You know, I'm not going to have a lot of sympathy for the FBI coming in and arresting either of those.
Yep.
You know, and if anything, I want them perp walked. Like, there's a point where, yeah, these guys need their faces. They should be embarrassed. They should be shunned. They should go. If the charge is true, they should go to federal prison. And I do think maybe it's a bit of a shot across the bow by the Trump administration saying, look, judges, if you're not going to follow the law, then you're going to pay the price, and we're going to make it blatantly. Everybody's going to see it. This is not going to be, hey, we're just going to be quiet. So if you're going to do this stuff, especially when just last year, what was the phrase of Democrats? No one is above the law.
Yeah.
The ex-president is he's not above the law. And now all of a sudden it's like, how dare you arrest a judge just because she broke the law? I mean, they should be giving her. It's like, wait, no. You don't get this both ways. And this goes back, I'm going to go old school. This goes back to the Harry Reid lessons on politicizing. If you change the rules and you set a new set of rules like Harry Reid did with the nuclear option of lowering how many votes needed to be done, or Harry Reid absolutely lying through his teeth about Mitt Romney and his taxes, when you do that, you don't then get to call foul later on when the other side does it. And so would I hope that the Republicans would be better than that? Of course. Do I think they are? They're in politics. No, yeah. They're gonna use everything. So none of this surprises me. I do think that as far as the optics go, I'm against you in terms of, I think that there is much more, yay, go get this evil judge, yay, go get this judge who is supporting illegal immigrants, more than, hey, the president arresting a judge, that might be fascist. Now, again, it would be very different if you were going in and you were just arresting this judge because whoever it was, we don't like this judge because she was freeing these not detainees, these suspects who we think, the court had come on the docket, and instead of putting them in jail for the 5 to 10 years we were expecting, she was consistently releasing them on their own recognizance,
Well,
and so coming in and arresting the judge for doing that, I think is very different than this lady snuck somebody out because she wanted to protect them when she knew ICE was coming to detain this suspect alleged of a felony. So yeah, I mean, and I get going all the way back. Thad was saying, hey, everybody due process, and I get that. And I think that it's tough because the Trump administration, I don't know who said when he was first deported, the Maryland man, oh, he was accidentally deported. It shouldn't have happened. Okay. But the minute you say that, I don't think whoever said that had the authorization to say it, because he never should have said it.
He shouldn't have said it, but it was true though.
It might be true, sure. But you don't say it. Yeah. And the other problem is now becomes a problem. You guys, you and I have talked about this. Okay, this guy, first of all, the Maryland dad, he is only going to be brought back to America if El Salvador says we're going to let him go back. A. B. The El Salvador president has said, nope, he's not coming back. But at the same time, he let the senator have drinks with him, and he didn't look like it didn't look like he was all the worse for wear, and I don't
Well,
mean to downplay the
Well, they've since transferred him from the max security prison
right
to a
to a different
version of Club Med, which is
yes.
good for him, I guess. I mean, all things considered, but
So, and that's my point is that I think that you may have a situation where the El Salvador president starts to go, okay, well, I'm going to send him back because it's covering my bases, and Trump's going to be here. You know, maybe in this case, it would be better to send him back. And if he gets sent back, don't think that it's going to be sent back and he's going to be released immediately to his family. He's going to, the first thing that happens, he hits the ground. I can write the script right now. They send him back. He's brought back on a military plane. He's taken from the military plane at Reagan or BWI or wherever the local Air Force they decide to land. He's put into a vehicle. He's driven over to the courthouse. The immigration judge is right there, ready to go with the file. Where's your lawyers? They're going to warn the lawyers. The lawyers are going to be there. They're going to say, okay, we're going to fast track this docket. So what have you had to say? They're going to do it in a day or two, and the judge is going to make a decision. And my guess is they're going to rescind the hold order that was issued in 2019. And the judge is going to say, well, look, let's see your knuckles. Let's see if there's tattoos there. Let's see, hey, is this a legitimate report that you abused your wife? Yeah, I find there probable cause to revoke your green card. Revoked. He's on a plane right back out.
sure.
Now, you could have that. I think that's probably what happens if he's brought back. And then the Trump White House goes, see, we were just trying to save the American people. Yes, obviously we should have done this first. And it won't be Trump, of course. It'll be something.
Yeah, not a setup at all.
Sorry, hey, mea culpa. We should have done this but like, guys, look, he's obviously from El Salvador. We sent him back to El Salvador. Now what El Salvador does? Okay, this is very different than in the old days. I think I've told you my Gitmo story about this, right? I had a senior officer who was the investigator for when I was down at Guantanamo 0203, and around 04 there were some accusations that 04 or 05 there were some accusations that some soldiers had been flushing the Quran down the toilet. So he was the investigator. He was a former police officer, and so he went down there. He was tagged to be the investigating officer. Went down. Sure enough, it came back completely unfounded because if you know the toilets down there, you couldn't have flushed a Quran. It's a circle. You would have had to rip it up, and it never happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he was telling me about a story that while he was down there, one of the detainees had been authorized for release, and so because he was there and because of what he was doing, they were like, "Hey, can you do the flight back? You know, can you be basically the OIC on the flight? Sure, just for custody." Yep. They fly out. He says, we took him down not him, but the MPs. They took him down to the base of the stairs, handed him off. He signed or whatever, and they're walking back up the steps to the plane when the shot went off. Mm. So he was handed off to the government of an ally who took this detainee who had been sent back, and instead of a trial, they did what they do. They don't believe in a lot of due process.
Process right there.
Yeah, that was the due process, was a bullet to the back of the head. And he went, I went up the stairs and we shut the door and we took off 5 minutes later. I mean, they didn't even spin down the engines. So it's a little bit different when, this guy's taken. And I think that part of the argument you see from the right, and this is a meme, so, take it for what it's worth. The number of deportations by George Bush was 2.5 million. By Obama was 3 million. By Biden was, 1.5 million. And by Trump has been, 100,000. How many injunctions? 0, 0, 0. Trump has 5. And so what's changed? Like even in his his first presidency, you didn't see that. So that's where you start to see people worry about the politicalization as well. by some of the judges. I have a hard time understanding, and I understand people say it's checks and balances. But when you have a federal judge, let's say from the state who's over the Northeast, Montana, and I'm not saying exactly, I'm just using this as an example, right?
Mhm.
The Montana federal judge in Montana.
Mhm.
And a federal judge in Montana writes an order that says the Trump administration cannot deport anybody at all simply because they believe that they are, a gang member, MS-13. Does the federal judge in that case really have the power and the jurisdiction to do that? Because you've seen so many times where they, and maybe it is, but
The short answer is yes, because it's unconstitutional. Like we've clearly established it, the process of due process. Now, if they've been into immigration and they found out that they are a member of MS-13, then that wasn't the issue at hand. The issue was not the deportation of gang members. The issue was randomly snatching a bunch of people up who look like gang members or who you perceive to be gang members, throwing them on a plane, getting them to Venezuela, and then trying to figure it out once you get to Venezuela. That was the issue.
Even the Supreme Court was split on this, right?
Nope, Supreme Court was 9-0 on it. Like, hey, no, stop.
On one of the things.
The most important thing was, hey, don't send people over without due process. That was the most important thing. Everything else is circumstantial. Stephen Miller again.
That's not what Alito said, though. That's not what I read.
Yeah, he had a dissent, of course, but the vote was still 9-0.
No, this was a different one. So
okay, you're talking about something else.
Yeah, so Alito and Thomas basically said, so there was this at 1 a.m. in the morning, Supreme Court signed a temporary restraining order that basically said, a TRO that said, hey, you can't keep doing whatever you're doing with immigration, right? I don't think it was necessarily the Venezuela one, but it was something like that.
Yeah.
And what Alito was basically saying was, well, hold on. This has always gone through the process before it gets to the Supreme Court. And we've always waited for it to go through the process. So think about somebody like who's on death row. It just doesn't get to the Supreme Court. Death row has to go through so many layers of the judge, the appellate judge, the federal, all that stuff, right? It goes all the way up through like 15 different and 30 years before it gets to the Supreme Court. And so Alito was like, we're breaking our own rules here because this is being filed on behalf of people that haven't been wronged. We used to say it was all, if somebody didn't have standing, then you don't get to sue. You have to be like, if I try to go and I say, okay, I don't like that. I don't like that Utah is banning Black teachers, which is not the case, obviously.
Yeah.
So I'm going to sue, right? I'm going to sue in Georgia. And I'm going to say, I think it's in federal court. I think it's absolutely wrong that Utah is going to stop letting Black teachers teach. It would get to the courthouse here and they'd say, you have no standing. How does this affect you? And I go, well, I just think it's wrong. It doesn't matter. Cool. It doesn't affect you. Yeah, go ahead.
I saw a video earlier that explains just that very, and I'm glad I saved it. I figured it would come up, but I'm going to play it, and then hopefully we can see it.
Sure.
And then we'll talk about it afterwards. All right, okay. I can get this thing to work right. I'll get it to work right. Shit.
If you can ever hire an engineer for 5 cents an episode, we'll be good.
I'm telling you. All right, let's see if I can get this thing to work. Here we go. Sound off.
Federal judges. Yeah, all those pesky activist judges are really getting on my nerves. The Supreme Court agreed to hear this? Yeah, they took it on as an emergency case. And I'm not exaggerating. If I win, I can do literally anything I want. But not like override the Constitution. No. I would definitely be able to override the Constitution with an executive order. No, that's not possible. You're clearly exaggerating like you do. I'm not. Do you remember when I signed that executive order ending birthright citizenship? Yeah, it was challenged by like a whole bunch of states and watchdog organizations. Right. There were several cases that ended up being heard in federal courts, and some of those judges issued national injunctions. But also, to be clear, one injunction alone, that still would have been enough. Yes, an injunction says that nationwide this executive order is unconstitutional and unenforceable. So the birthright citizenship case, this is the emergency case that the Supreme Court is hearing? No, I was just explaining how those pesky activist judges have been keeping me in check. The emergency case is actually us trying to strip them of the power to issue national injunctions at all. Wait, so if you win and judges can't issue injunctions, then who would fight back against a clearly unconstitutional executive order like ending birthright citizenship? Anyone that was impacted personally by the executive order would have to sue us individually. Stop it. You're saying that if I was born here and my parents weren't citizens, I would have to sue you to get my citizenship back? Yeah, and here's the kicker. If you win in a federal court, that doesn't mean dick for anyone else. Holy shit. What about the states that sued you? This is where it starts to get interesting because states can sue on behalf of their residents. So every state would have to sue to reinstate birthright citizenship and win. Right. And some states might not, but then they could appeal it to the Supreme Court, who could give a nationwide ruling. Sure, but you've seen how fast I can move on tariffs. SCOTUS already gets petitioned for 8,000 cases a year, and they only have time to hear 60. All I have to do is sign a piece of paper. You have to fight an incredibly expensive and time-consuming legal battle. So you can just flood the zone with executive orders, and we can't even rule them unconstitutional until judges rule on them individually. Oh, yeah. I can disrupt supply chains. I can determine what medical procedures you can get. I can take your firearms away. And until you win a case, your state wins a case, or the Supreme Court rules on something in a couple of years, my executive order stands. Oh my God. And you're still thinking like a good person. I've already signed executive orders crippling law firms. I could cripple all of them. Holy shit. This is the biggest case of your sad little life. But you're still not bringing Abrego Garcia. I don't actually have the power to do that. You're suing all of the federal judges. So, yeah, all those pesky activists.
Little bit of background. I found this guy's page a couple of days ago, and I've been watching. He does definitely left-leaning, but he does at least a pretty good job at explaining the strategy and the process, right? Taking all the bias out, the strategy pretty much is the same, right? SCOTUS can't do anything unless they rule on it. And based off of the executive order, it's an individual, it's a case-by-case basis, right? So if the injunction goes through, which is, I think, what you were talking about, the injunction on the federal judges, you would literally have to apply on a case-by-case basis, whether it's immigration or for this video, birthright citizenship, whatever the case is, this is what it is. So I think, yeah, it's a slippery slope, man. I'm not really a fan of it. I dig the strategy. I understand why and how. Brilliant, actually. Smart. But not good for the coming, man, at all. I don't.
This goes back to what Greg said and what I've said for a while, and we've agreed on this. The legislature isn't doing their effing job.
Absolutely not. But I mean, you have this threat. I think Murkowski was the one. Did you see that Murkowski interview where she was like, "Hey, we understand behind closed doors, senators have talked about how we recognize the perception of what it is, but we have this albatross over our head called Elon Musk threatening to financially support and primary anyone who disagrees." So for a lot of us, that's what I'm saying. But I mean, you got to understand, they are addicted to the money and the power. So the threat of them being primaried and possibly losing out on their grifting gig has a lot of our congressmen and women in a chokehold. They refuse to act.
And the irony of that is Murkowski should be primaried because of making that statement. Oh. Like if you truly believe that me speaking up means I'm going to lose my gig as a senator, well, so I better not speak up. Yeah, you should be out. She should have resigned. Like I didn't hear that. She should have resigned after saying that.
Right. But that, I
Because
mean,
if you
it's
other
not just
countries, I
her.
think that happens much more.
Yeah.
Well, whoever it was. But I think you see that in other countries too, a lot more, where it's almost like, hey, this is so embarrassing that one of two reasons. Either A, I did something wrong and it came out, so I'm going to resign. Or B, this goes so much against my beliefs that the government would do this that I can't work for the government.
Is just trying to listen
I got it.
as carefully as I can.
Sorry about that. I'm gonna try to pause it and start it over. I got it. I'm gonna bring it up so we can see it. But yeah, it is definitely I never thought I'd see the day where Congress would just be like, you know what? Hey man, we love scraping our money off the top. We're not gonna get involved. And I'll let you hear it from her mouth, and then we'll talk about it.
Sure.
Let's see. Come on, thing work. Right, there we go.
Part of what I have been doing with my team is just trying to listen as carefully as I can to what is happening and how it is happening and the impacts it is having on the ground. And we're honest up front in saying we don't have all the answers, but we're trying to unlock at different opportunities and in different ways as much as we can. And it is as hard as anything that I have been engaged in the 20 plus years I've been in the Senate. You have to say to people who are afraid, or who are we are all afraid. Okay. So I've stated it. But we are we're in a time and a place where I don't know. I certainly I have not been here before. And I'll tell you, I'm oftentimes very anxious myself about using my voice because retaliation is real. And that's not right. But that's what you've asked me to do. And so I'm going to use my voice to the best of my ability. And sometimes it will be viewed in a way that, well, that's pretty confrontational. And other times it's going to be using my mother's charm that I learned as a young girl, and in direct communication with those that I've made relationships with, and am able to affect some change that way. But I've got to figure out how I can do my best to help the many who are so anxious and are so afraid.
Yep.
Did she say somewhere else that the retaliation was from? I missed that, within her own party.
Yeah. So that was only 2 minutes. I didn't want to play the whole. It was like
I didn't want to hear the whole thing.
7.5 minutes. So after they expand about it, and they said, well, you have a guy in the White House who's threatening to primary every Republican, and then behind closed doors, we're able to have candid conversations, but it always comes back to, well, who's going to say something, because what's lying on the other side of it. And she was like, it's a really difficult position to be in. And I'm like, that's your fucking job.
Do your exactly. Do your job. like realistically, do your job. And you know what? If they want a primary, okay. So I look like this. One of two things is going to happen if she gets primary, right? Okay. Either the people are going to say, I appreciate that you stood up for us and you did what your job was. You showed integrity and you showed that you are a true leader. Or people are going to go, well, yeah, you deserve to be out, but let it be up to the people. Who cares if you're primary? Like, to me, that is an absolute spineless position. And don't get me wrong, it's just as bad by the Democrats. And not like the Democrats have a lot of steel backbones in their party either. But like again, if the whole thing is, if you're in power to stay in power, you should get kicked out of power.
The threat of being taken off the government teat is very it's enough to it's enough to make people who say, you know what, hey, you're right.
What do you think? I'm curious, and I don't know what the number is. I wonder what the least net worth senator is, and what that number is. My guess for senators, now maybe the House is a little different. The House, my guess, is lower. But my guess is I don't believe that there would be a senator that is under 8 figures of a net worth. That's at least $10 million. I'd be surprised. And if it is, it's a brand new one for somehow. Like, yeah. But I'd be curious. But it's rare. You know, it's going to be rare regardless.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now to see. Hopefully I can get through. Oh, they don't have it.
Networthofsenators.com.
Yeah. No, this is always in 2012. Yeah, it doesn't show it. But in talking about that, have you heard about the? Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's going to be, regardless, whoever it is, it's still going to be more than you or I will ever see in our lifetimes.
Oh, absolutely.
Whoever makes the least amount.
Absolutely. I'm trying to find the name of. So there was a representative who says that they, I think she's out of Michigan. She has a way to save the Democrats. Oh, really? Slotkin. Yeah, Slotkin. She's the so she made news this week about saying that she has a way of saving the Democratic Party, and the way to do it is to adopt the alpha energy of the Detroit Lions coach Dan Campbell, and to get away from the wokeness. And to get away from the wokeness, and I just first term senator, and I just I heard it and I listened to her, and then I realized that they are using it again. That I don't think they understand what that word means, right? I think they're using the word wokeness as a pejorative for being black, because
they're using it.
Well,
I don't think that's true. I think woke has become a left.
Yeah, the Democratic Party didn't lose because of wokeness. They didn't lose because of wokeness.
I think in part they did.
Absolutely not. And I can show you where. So, the biggest issues coming out of the election were what? What were the biggest issues? The post election
immigration, DEI.
No, not DEI. Immigration,
economy.
Mm-hmm. DEI wasn't a conversation until the Trump admin came on board and brought it up.
So I might have here senators. Well, what is it?
Slotkin.
I don't know who that is.
She's out of Michigan. She's a senator. Alyssa Slotkin. Mm-hmm.
So the numbers that are showing Wikipedia, list of current members of the United States Congress by wealth. This is on Wikipedia. Now they only have like 49 lists, and this is from House and Senate. But the least well off as of 2019, I think it's because of it's the reporting open secret. There's a Democratic House. The person with making the least amount of money, the net worth is $10.7 million.
Oh man, how do you expect them to survive off of that?
Well, this Wikipedia, and
I know.
I put in, net worth of senators 2024. So, I mean, If you want the richest by
No.
2025, Rick Scott, it says here is worth $550 million.
Oh my goodness.
He's number 1. Number 10. Oh, I like number 9. Number 9, Senator Mitch McConnell, estimated net worth of $52 million. So there's a big drop off after that. And then the number 10, Utah, was $31.72 million. John Kerry.
Cool.
But you remember John Kerry? John Kerry is a billionaire. So
yeah, I told you
through his wife. Don't get me wrong, but still,
it's the biggest legal grift that you can get into right now. So the issues that the voters said mattered the most to them post-election: inflation and the cost of living, jobs in the economy. Yep. Immigration and the border, threats to democracy, abortion, Project 2025, corruption in government, Social Security and Medicare.
Pause for a second.
Yeah.
Pause for a second. Okay.
Yep.
The first one was what?
The first one was inflation and the cost of living.
Okay, I'll say that's both parties. Second one?
Yep. Jobs in the economy.
Both parties. Next one?
Immigration and the border.
Republicans.
Threats to democracy.
Democrats.
Abortion.
Democrats.
Project 2025.
Democrats.
Corruption in government.
Probably both.
Both. Security and Medicare. Social Security and Medicare.
Probably
These
both,
are
just because it's older. It's older people. So, and they run both parties. So probably both.
Supreme Court appointments. Red team.
Probably red team. Yeah, I was going to say probably more Republican.
Climate change and the environment.
Democrat.
National security and foreign policy.
Republican.
Healthcare.
Probably both, but more leaning Democrat.
Democrats 7, Republicans 1.
Oh,
7
hard. I didn't even know it had that breakdown. That's interesting.
Yeah, federal budget deficit.
Probably Republican.
6-1.
Yeah.
Voter fraud and election security.
Republican.
6-1. You know what's not on here?
DEI.
DEI, because it wasn't a thing until January 20th.
Nothing. There's no racial. Well, yeah.
Well, it's broken down.
There's nothing on there about woke or social.
Well, yeah, it says late deciders who are more concerned about Democrats being too extreme than Republicans. So that's the closest we can get to woke is. And then the Democratic candidate being too extreme was -86 with Democrat voters, +58 with Republican voters, -50 with blacks, -4 with Hispanics, -11 with whites, and then +9 on late deciders as a whole. So that was the second lowest issue between late deciders. The next lowest issues were the Republican candidate being too extreme at -24, and Republicans in general being too extreme with -5 differential.
It's all -5.
Yeah, and that's from navigating the battlefield, navigatorresearch.org. I'll post the link in there. But what I'm saying is, so yeah, DEI wasn't a thing until it was a thing. And then woke, like I said, woke, this pejorative of woke is now being used as everybody's too woke. Everybody's too woke. Woke has become the new N-word. Everybody's being too.
Well, so, and the reason I don't know if it's just my thought process or pushback or whatever. When you have like Saturday Night Live, for example, go all in on anti-Trump and pro-gay, pro-trans, pro-leftist, and Saturday Night Live, just a small example. Yeah. I think that's kind of the idea, without naming and saying it's about wokeness or it's about DEI. I think that's kind of where all of those other things get mixed up. It's very tough to say. But
remember, I told you liberals liberals will take a word from the black community and adopt it to their policies wrongly. And then once it catches on nationally, it's automatically assumed that, oh, everything woke is bad. I mean, they did the same thing with Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter was a small grassroots movement. Once the liberals got a hold of it, it became national. And then we came into All Lives Matter and all that else. It's the same thing. Same thing with wokeness, same thing with DEI. And what we found out, is 9 times out of 10, even though society tries to make it a black issue, it's not really a black issue, because most of the policies they believe are dominated or affected by black people generally aren't, because the Democrats didn't lose because of woke issue. 92% of black women voted for Democrats. 83% of black men voted for Democrats. It's not a black issue, but black people, once again, are always at the crux of blame, right? Oh, if we get away from trying to appeal to everybody, if we get away from trying to give everybody welfare and all this other stuff, then maybe we can get back to the middle. Well, sure, but that's not hurting the black community, because by far and away the black community isn't the greatest benefactor of government benefits. It's just isn't.
Right. Well, and that, but again, you can also look at statistics, damn statistics, and statistics.
Even if you look at that, it's still not blacks.
Right. Well, but it's when you twist the statistics, you can make perception reality.
Sure.
And so the thing about woke, though, now, woke's been around for 5 to 8 years?
No, woke has been in the
no. Yeah. I'm not talking to the black community. I know the black
liberals
came up in the 1960s.
liberals have taken it over here in the last decade. Yeah,
that's what I mean. So in the last 10 or less years, because language evolves, right?
Yeah.
And so woke, to me, I never once ever heard woke in terms of woke meant having anything to do with the black community. Like, I didn't know that's what it meant. So liberal woke 8 years. Perfect. Yeah, exactly. That, and that's kind of my point, is that when you're talking about woke now, because you go back far enough and you can see the changes in how things are set. Like, it used to be that when you talk about controlling, like, abortion, it was pro rights. Oh, it's pro rights. We're not pro abortion. We're pro rights.
Yeah.
And that's why, pro life. And then the Democrats went, oh no, ours sounds bad. You guys are just pro birth. You're not actually pro life, because if you're pro life. So it's all this battle about words. So, like, woke, I never thought of woke as being a black or white word. To me, it was a left or right word. And so when you start seeing in conventional verbiage, especially like that said in the last 8 years, wokeness, it didn't have anything to do with race. Now, DEI, DEI has always been shown as race, even though you and I have both seen that it was actually white women that got more advantage from DEI than anybody else. And like welfare and all that stuff. Yeah, it's seen, anybody who looks at the numbers, they realize that there's more poor white people getting welfare than poor black people. It absolutely is a bastardization. And so, when you're looking at these things, when you have the words as well, instead of making I think this is part of the problem with the left. The right, not so much, because the right don't really care. The right just says what we think common sense is, right? There's kind of that, you know what I mean? I'm not trying to make that sound dumb, but the right's kind of like, conservatives are kind of like, this is, and for all, I don't even want to say conservatives. I want to say the right, because
we have to be clear that there's two separate branches, right? There's conservatives, and then there's the right wing, which is
our video just died. Okay,
no, you're back. Yeah,
so back. Are you? Yeah, I must have been my side. So I think when it comes to the the Republicans and the right are better at using simple words and simple phrases like MAGA.
Oh, we know.
I mean,
we know.
Great again, right?
We know as the black community, they love to stick to simple words and try to use them. Yeah.
Oh, sure. And the left, because the left, especially in academia, is we're going to start talking about what it really means to be an American. What does it really mean to be somebody of African descent in America? And I, as an intellectual on the left, I'm going to tell you all what it means to be an African American in this country. Instead of going, hey, KJ, what's it like to be an American? Like on the right, it's, hey, what do you think, dude? Like I think most white conservatives are more like, dude, I don't know what it's like to be a black person in America. How would I know that? But you have this pretending on the left, and we've talked about this, Malcolm X, of there's nothing worse than a liberal, a white liberal trying to say, the ally.
I'm your ally. So, I know what you're going through. No, the fuck you don't. Yeah.
Well, and that's what kind of drove me bonkers over the last few years is I'm post-racial. I don't see race. What? Like, seriously? Like, now, do I think it's okay if I say, hey, Sergeant Johnson, I need to talk to Sergeant Johnson. And they go, which one? And I say, the black one. The what? I'm like, well, what do you mean? One of our Sergeant Johnsons is black and one of them is white. Like, if it was a male and a female Sergeant Johnson, I was like, the dude, they'd go, okay, no big deal. Or the girl, okay, go get her. But if it was black or white, it'd be like, oh, you can't say that. I'm like, why not? Like, I need Smith. Which one? The redhead. Okay, I'll go get him. But the funny thing is, if it's like, hey, I need Smith. Which one? The redhead or the black hair? It's like, you mean the black guy? Like black hair? What? But you get this pushback that is just so stupid. Yeah. Oh, for sure. Well, that, let alone the stigma of sounding white and being the sellout. We talked at Glory. We can go back to one of my favorite movies, Glory. Hey, Snowflake, Denzel Washington going off. It doesn't matter if you walk white, you talk white, you ain't never gonna be white. Oh, you don't like that, do you? You don't like that. You want to hunt me? And but in the black community, you had the paper bag test, right?
Yeah, you do.
If you're lighter skinned than this, oh, you're good to go. If you're darker, I don't want you in my house. You're not marrying my daughter.
Well, so, that was an adoption into the black community based off of what was culturally accepted. Post Reconstruction. Yeah, post Reconstruction, right? So it was like, hey, all right, we can be around you, but you got to be a certain complexion. Like the darkies, guys who look like me didn't stand a chance, right? But they kind of got away from that 1% nigger blood thing and got into a more.
Oh, that was the white people saying if you're lighter than a paper bag, you're good to go.
Yeah. And black.
Okay.
Yeah, no. Black people just adopted it as a way of acceptance because, again, it was that mindset of the closer we can assimilate to whiteness, we will. But that'll take us into a whole different episode, and we really don't have time. And the assimilation of whiteness and why some races are able to get ahead and why black people just tend to lag behind despite everything. But all right, we got
final thought then. Final thought. To go with what we're going on, there was a Japanese individual who sued to be claiming whiteness in the late 19th century. This he lost, but he was whiter than I am. So racial, it's not really about race. It's about where you come from. So even today, that's probably true to some degree. Like honestly, my one of my best friends married an first generation African girl, and she's great. I wouldn't have a problem if I was ever going to date somebody who was now I'm married, but if I was going to date somebody who was black,
don't get you in trouble, man.
No. I was just going to say, if I was going to marry somebody, if I was going to date somebody who was black and they were from Africa, I'd have no problem with that. I love African people. African American people have the stigma, and you even have that from people from Africa. Go, yeah, this is tough. You know, like I don't want to be associated with the people that were born here because
we can definitely get into the disassociation of Africans with African Americans, and man, I mean, it's just way too much. Our final thought is, we have guests lined up for the next 3 months. Please tune in. Please stay attentive to the notes. We'll see you guys same bat time, same bat channel. Lance, we are out of here. Gotta go.
Out.
Gee, mate, what do you want to do tonight?
The same thing we do every night, Pinky. Try to take over the world.
All right, let's get into it.
Try to take over the world. Try to take over the world.
And greatest chaplain in the world, Mr. Lance
Try to
O'Neill.
take over the world.